Hey guys, all sorts of touring coming up, but I'm sure you want me to jump right into the lesson, so I'm just going to be super brief. I just got back from France with my quartet, playing Litchfield Jazz Festival this weekend with Randy Brecker. I'm going to be doing a ton of touring with Chris Botti throughout the United States in August. I'll also be touring through Brazil for a week in August. And then we're announcing fall dates really soon, but some highlights will be Chile and South Africa and much more. So just make sure to check out my website for tour dates. All right, so jumping into this now. This is another lesson that I'm doing for jazzlessonvideos.com. We're going to talk about 3 ways that you need to be analyzing standards. The first 2 are pretty obvious, but you're probably not doing them in depth enough, and you probably don't understand the full scope of the importance. The first 2 are going to be chord tones and arpeggiating, and the second one is going to be scales and knowing all the scales for each chord. And we're going to talk about in a second why it's so important, why you're probably not doing them in depth enough, and why you probably don't understand the full value. The last thing is going to be Roman numeral analysis, and we're going to clear up a myth that theory and ear training are separate vehicles, separate ways of going about knowing a standard. No, theory helps your ear. A lot of times when people have poor ears, they don't have ears that are fully developed, it's because they haven't done any sort of theory application to help them properly develop their ears. So we're going to go through all of that. And if you want, as a resource, what we have that goes along with this, we've got a PDF package called Standard Analysis. And what it has is it has an arpeggio exercise with chord tones for 50 different standards. It has the scales for all of those 50 different standard chord progressions. And it has the Roman numeral analysis for all of these 50 standard chord progressions. The Roman numeral analysis is pretty tough, so it really helps to have that, especially as a reference. But even for the chord tones and the scales, it's a really useful reference. It's a really useful practice tool, so to make sure to check that out. All right, guys, so the first thing that we want to analyze with any standard, and again, we're just talking about chord progressions here. The first thing that we want to analyze is the chord tones of each chord. So the shedding fear that's associated with that is arpeggios. For some reason, people shy away from actually practicing arpeggios. For you to really know a jazz standard, you need to be able to arpeggiate through each chord. The same way that a pianist or guitarist, and I realize some of you might be pianists or guitarists, so this is going out more towards horn players. A pianist or guitarist, they don't know the song, they don't know the chord changes to a song until they can play the chords all the way through the song. They need to be able to play all the chords, they need to be able to comp for the soloist. That's just something that they have to be able to do to play through the song. We, as horn players, don't truly know a song until we can play all the arpeggios. That is our way of essentially testing our knowledge of the song. If you can play all the arpeggios through a song, that means that you actually know what the chords are. And it's so funny, people shy away from practicing this, or they think they're beyond this, and let me tell you, nobody's beyond this. Like, when I'm learning a new song, a lot of times the first thing that I do is literally just play through the arpeggios so I can learn the chords. It's so important. I really can't stress that enough. So just real quick, taking a look at one of the charts here that's available in this standard analysis package that has all 3 of the things that we're talking about today with analyzing standards. It's got all of those things in it. So we're just going to take a real quick look at this. This chart, it's called The Days of Drinks and Flowers. I'm sure you'll recognize the chord changes here as being the same as another standard with a very similar name. So this one, you'll see we've got all the arpeggios written out, just 1, 3, 5, 7. this is the exercise you want to do with any song. Super simple, but it's one that you have to do. And one of the best ways to memorize arpeggios, I find, for a lot of students that I used to work with when I was doing Skype lessons, I find that one of the best ways for you to memorize something is by reading it first. A lot of people are more visual learners, or it just helps for them to have the visuals. It helps them to be able to see it written out. You play through it 10 times and it's practically memorized. Or maybe it's going to take a little bit more, but just playing through it, it doesn't take that long. It's one of the best ways that you can memorize something. It's just literally playing through it. And if you got it written out, great. So that's what we've got here. Okay, so now jumping into the second thing that you have to analyze in any standard chord progression that you're looking at. You need to know the scale that goes with each chord in the song. So for instance, if you've got, speaking in concert on this tune, if you've got F major, then it's just the F major scale. In the second bar, we've got E flat 7, it's going to be E flat mixolydian, or the E flat dominant scale. And check it out, scales get a bad rap. A lot of times when you know, a critical listener hears someone who's playing not very melodically, they say, oh, that guy sounds like he's just playing a bunch of scales. But the funny thing is, a really developed world-class jazz musician hearing that same person, they're probably going to say, no, they're just not playing the right scales. So what happens a lot of times is people, they sound like they're pushing buttons. And the issue is not that they're playing too many scales. The issue is that they just don't have the ability to play the scales in the right places. Now, let's get one thing straight. When I'm improvising, I'm not thinking about scales. I'm not thinking about this stuff. But I practiced for years and years, and still practice when I learn a new song, to make sure that I know what all the scales in each chord are and what each chord is, because that's what allows you to play a really melodic line. If you analyze a Charlie Parker solo, a Dexter Gordon solo, a John Coltrane solo, you will see there's this picture-perfect voice leading using scales from one bar to another. Beat 4 into beat 1 of the next bar is always this perfect voice leading. Voice leading is just a smooth transition from one chord to another using a melodic line. And they just do it so perfectly. Hank Mobley is another great example of the guys who really would nail that. And believe it or not, a lot of times there isn't that much chromaticism in the lines. If you want to get into the chromaticism, check out the videos that I've done on approach notes and enclosures. That stuff is important. But a lot of times what you'll hear in these jazz legend solos are just scale notes. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play through the first half of this tune, and I'm literally going to only use notes that line up with the scale of each chord. That's it. So what I did there was I literally just played the notes of every chord scale in time, bar by bar, and I just used smooth transitions, stepwise motion, going from bar to bar. And so to really master that, what you have to do is you have to have the discipline to just practice being able to use just the scale notes and being able to use them well. An amateur player on a tune like this, they would look at those first few bars and they would see this, and they would just treat it all as F major. They would see the song, I'm going to turn off the piano a little bit, they would see the song or hear that the song is in F major, and they would just play a bunch of F major stuff. But check out how that just doesn't work. Not really working. doesn't really capture the sound like it was when I was just playing earlier and just playing the scale tones. So again, a lot of times there's a myth that unmelodic players are just playing a bunch of scales. Unmelodic players actually probably don't have a very good demand of their scales, playing them through the changes of a song. Okay, so the third way to analyze standards that's really important is using Roman numeral analysis. And this gets into a little more theory here. And so there's another myth that I want to debunk. And that's the myth that using theory and using your ears are opposite approaches. That is so not true. A lot of times I've had people, come to me and say, yeah, I just mainly use my ears. And then they play through a standard and they don't hit any of the harmony. And I'm sitting there thinking, I wonder, how are you using your ears? Because you're not playing any of the chord changes. Now, the reality is that some people say, oh, I use my ears because they like to just kind of play freely and they think it sounds good and cool, that's fine. The reality is a lot of those people just aren't hitting the changes. And a lot of times it's because they haven't had the discipline to look at a set of changes and really understand it. And so again, we talked about how important just arpeggiating and scales are. But if you really want to get solid at this stuff, the best thing that you can do is use Roman numeral analysis. So that is going to give your ears, again, the purpose of this is to train your ears. This is going to give your ears a deeper understanding of harmony just by giving labels. So when we see something that's green or red or blue, we have a system for identifying those colors because we've labeled them as green and red and blue. You can do the same thing with chord progressions, and this is how you do it, by giving them Roman numeral analysis. So when you have something like this, that's a 3-6-2-5. Probably a lot of you recognize that. Now, you can do those combinations of giving it different numbers with all sorts of things, like the first few bars of this chart that we've been looking at. 1, flat 7 dominant, it's also called a backdoor dominant. 3, 6, or 5 of 2, depending on how you want to think of it. Into 2, 2 minor, 2 is minor. And then that's a backdoor 2-5. So it's labeled as being 4 minor, and then flat 7 dominant. 3, 6, 2, 5. And then this is a minor 2-5 to the 6. And then a secondary dominant, a 5 of 5, and then 2, 5. And then we're back to 1. When you label things like that, that gives your ear a reference to understand, oh, right, this is a sound, it's a 5 of 5 going into a 2-5. Giving those labels just helps your ears really lock in the harmony so you can memorize them. When I started doing Roman numeral analysis in college, I thought it was a joke. I was like, how is this going to help me with anything? But all of a sudden, I started memorizing standards way faster, and I would retain them forever, really, because finally my ears were developed enough, because my brain had decluttered everything. My ears were developed enough through this understanding of the Roman numeral analysis that I could just remember all these devices, because these devices happen everywhere. So what we've done with this PDF, this Analyzing Standards PDF, is we've given you all three of these things. We've got the Roman numeral analysis that we just went over so you can see all that. We've got the scales and the chords of 50 different standard chord progressions, and these are all chord progressions that everybody should know. So make sure to check this out on jazzlessonvideos.com, jazzlessonvideos.com. The link is in the description, I'm sure. And again, a lot of touring dates coming up, so really hope to see you guys on the road soon, and stay tuned for more content.